Welcome back to Ralph Pinson's podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern man. This episode was sponsored anonymously in honor of all of Klal Yisrael being inscribed and sealed in the Book of Life. Today's episode is a special Yom Kippur edition Q&A and the fifth in our Q&A series.
How do we relate and work through the discomforts of fasting during Yom Kippur?
So the Baditchever once said that Baditchever was a great Hasidic master. And he said that on Yom Kippur, a very lesson, who wants to eat? Not that you can't eat. Yom Kippur is not about afflicting the body. There's no mitzvah to afflict the body. The idea of Yom Kippur is that, a lot of the things that we do in practice on Yom Kippur is, we'll say it this way. There's actually two ways how to see this. And one way to see it is that Yom Kippur forces us to bump up against death. And one is to transcend life, or transcend the drama of life. So let's use the first paradigm, the first way of thinking about Yom Kippur. The first way of thinking about Yom Kippur is, on Yom Kippur we do a lot of things, or before Yom Kippur, that are similar to death practices. For example, a kaparis, which is a famous thing about slaughtering a bird, however you do it, but there's some type of, something visceral of death, going into a mikveh, going into a ritual bath, which is, Shulchan Aruch rules we should do our Erev Yom Kippur. Everyone does that. Is the idea of literally what a body was done to a body after 120. You put on white garments, which is like the shrouds that a person's buried with. So there's a lot of not eating, not intimacy, all these things. A lot of things. On one hand, it's a death practice, which means imagine you did have only, God forbid, 24 hours to live, right? A lot of times, the reason why we don't do the right things, and we're acting sometimes in a very low level of potential, is we say, okay, tomorrow we can do it. And, I'll get around to it. I really should make up with my friend, but I'll do it, next week. I really should call this guy and I haven't spoken to him in a while, or I really should do this, but, I have infinite amount of time. I'll figure it out. I'll do it. But if someone told you, God forbid, someone told you really only have 24 hours to live, then your life, and those 24 hours would be the most meaningful 24 hours of your life, because you would do exactly what you should be doing at every moment. You would make up with every person that you had a fight with. You would speak to all the people that you haven't spoken to in a while. You would love your children. You would hug your wife. You would do all the right things correctly, because your mind would be in the correct state. So one level Yom Kippur is, how could I induce myself to feel that place where the immediacy of death is actually very real? So therefore, the immediacy of what the purpose of life and the meaning of life and how I can live my life becomes that much stronger. That's one understanding. So if you look at the Ramah, Ramosha Islish, when he talks about wearing these garments, and in many different places he speaks about the same idea, one reason is because it reminds us of death, and the other reason is because white is symbolic of angelic clothes. So that's like the parallel story, which is that they're not representing the immediacy of death, but almost the transcendence of all the attachments that we have to things that of food and drink and relationships. Yom Kippur is not a time that we're supposed to fast from food, but you're supposed to be transcendent of food and who can eat and who wants to eat. That's really the mindset. And the truth is, I think there's also the body. This is something that if you put your mind out of it, most people think, like certainly as Yom Kippur is coming along, they think they're actually hungry, and their mind tells them that they're hungry, and therefore they're constantly thinking about food. But if you allow your body to guide you without actually your mind guiding you, you would find that over a certain period of time, the body literally starts eating from itself. Like it's chayos merav. That's the way that Rizal talks about. Like the fast itself becomes the source of nourishment, which means the body goes into a different type of state where it doesn't need food from the outside, but it actually takes from whatever the reserves that it has within the body and starts generating. So when a person fasts long enough, obviously not for a long period of time, but if a person starts long enough, after a certain point of time during the day of Yom Kippur, if you stop with your head thinking that you're hungry, you'll actually realize you're not hungry. Your hunger just disappears. Now, it takes about 15 hours, 20 hours till you get to that place. By the time you reach the sort of the peak of Yom Kippur, where you're reaching the final stage of Yom Kippur, you're actually, physically, you're not hungry. If you're hungry, it's just because your mind is telling you you're hungry and you get out of your head. If you just allow the experience of Yom Kippur to kick into right gear, you'll realize that as Yom Kippur is progressing, food becomes less an issue. And if you just go with it, and if you allow yourself to be that, you're going to feel much lighter. And as you're going to pray the final prayers of Yom Kippur, especially with Ne'ilah, you're going to feel a certain lightness of being. Like you're going to feel very eerie, very light. And that's a good feeling. And because you just unburdened yourself. There's in Chazal it talks about things that are heavy. The three things that are heavy. One of the things that are heavy is sin is heavy. Things that are negative are heavy. They weigh you down. And when you become unburdened, this is what it says in the name of many tzaddikim, that the sensation that you have as Yom Kippur is over, when Yom Kippur is over, of this lightness, of this being unburdened, it's a physical sensation because you haven't eaten for a long time, but it's also the unburdening of all the negativities that you have. So you have to just allow yourself to be in the presence of yourself without trying to, think that, I really should be doing that, Just go be Yom Kippur in Yom Kippur. Just be there. If you allow yourself to just be fully within Yom Kippur, in Yom Kippur you'll feel like this lightness of being, and then you'll feel the unburdening, and then on Matzah Yom Kippur, the end of Yom Kippur, you will feel this sensation of a total unburdening. Your sins have already been forgiven. And therefore, I always say that the way you know if Yom Kippur worked out, if you really did it correctly, is after Yom Kippur if you don't rush to eat food. And that's why there's a certain custom to actually do Kiddush Levana to sanctify the moon after Yom Kippur. And I think the deeper reason for that is that proves, if you can do that proves that you actually Yom Kippur worked. If right after I must have food. Now, if you have a headache, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about a person's not feeling well. I'm talking about a person's fine, but in their mind, I didn't eat 24 hours, so let's go eat. No, look, watch. I can go outside. I can dance in front of the moon, and I'm fine. It's not everything's gonna be working out. Everything's gonna be fine. If you can do that, Yom Kippur works. If you make after they finally blow the shofar, or after Ma'ariv, if the first thing you dash to the back of the shul to get a piece of sponge cake, especially if you jab the guy next to you to get it, then maybe you should go back to start over Kol Nidra and start over Yom Kippur. The certain sense of lightness that's the sensation that you're supposed to feel on Yom Kippur Eve, on Yom Kippur as Yom Kippur ends.
Thank you very much, Rav.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Rav Pinson's podcast. To submit questions or to sponsor a future episode, please email ravpinsonpodcast@gmail.com. The link is in the description below.